Lacremela, the girl who cried tears of gold. Once upon a time, in a village far, far away, there was an old couple who always wanted children. They lived in a small house of modest proportion, with a clay-tiled roof and a large grapevine that in the summer grew across the front. Jan, the old man, was a farmer. Veda, his wife, would make beautiful loaves of bread every day and would lay out pasta and cut it with a butcher knife in the finest and thinnest strips for soup. Veda was also an artist. The inside of her house was painted with the most exotic and complicated phrases on the wall decor painted in her hand. And so had been their lives, as life had always been. Veda had made a wedding dress, along with the help of her mother and her aunts and cousins. Jan had saved enough money to buy them both coffins, which they kept high and dry in the cellar of their home. After all, there are major life events. Marriage and death must be prepared for, after all. The couple had had many happy years together, then raised ducks and chickens and pigs and cattle that they let roam freely. Every morning the pigs would trot down the street in a herd, meet the neighbors' pigs, convene and go into the mountains and to forage and graze at night. At night they would march home, and every pig knew its home, and would go there, splitting off from the various directions, every pig timing and knowing its home. Of course, they had lamb and sheep and several goats and a dog and a cat and other animals. They lived a simple and very gratifying life. But of all the things they had experienced, they never had children. Jan would kiss Veda every night as the sun went down and say, "One day we will have children." And then he would blow out the candle and hold her hand. Days became weeks, and weeks became years. Winter became spring, spring became summer, summer became fall, and fall became winter again. Jan and Veda's once black hair became grayer and grayer, and finally white. One night after John had kissed her and blown out the candle and fallen asleep, Veda woke up and slipped out of the bed in her gown and bonnet, her long braids arranged under the cap. She went to the little chair in front of the fireplace, and she stoked the dying flame, added a log, and picked up her knitting and knit. As she knit, she said, "Doamne ajute," or "Lord help me. I have lived many years upon this earth and never asked too much, but I have always wanted a child." In that moment, a gust of cold and blustery wind blew out of the chimney, spraying soot and embers upon the hearth and the floor. Veda jumped up in a fright and stamped out the embers, confused and coughing. When the air cleared and the embers had blown out and the smoke settled and the fire returned to a normal brightness, strewn on the floor and covered in ash was a baby blanket. Veda picked it up and dusted it off, held it, and then folded it up and put it in the knitting basket. That was strange, she thought, and she moved the logs off the fire and went to bed. It was the middle of winter, with snow upon the ground. In a village, there was not much to do during this time. The rooster crowed, and Jan and Veda woke, ate some mamaliga and eggs with bacon, and prepared for the day. As Jan was feeding the horses, Veda milked the cows and goats and returned inside to make some cheese for the long, hard winter. Veda looked out of her front window and saw a cape figure by the road in front of the house. She waved. The mysterious figure waved back and beckoned her to come forth. Veda put on her boots, her heavy coat and scarf and hat and gloves, opened the door, and walked towards her. The woman was like no one she had ever seen before. She wore a long green coat that reached to her ankles and a hood that was lined with leopard skin. Her hands were gloved with exquisite dark velvet gloves of midnight blue, which were embroidered with gold and silver and patterns of exotic animals. Her boots were laced across the front with red laces and were covered by a heavy red velvet gown, which gold embroidery was across the bodice. But most unusual was her face. Veda had only heard of people like her, and certainly had never seen anyone like her in person. She had skin as black as the darkest night, and eyes as dark as the darkest night, and teeth so white that they made the brilliant snow look gray in comparison. Under the hood was an abundance of curly, dark ringlets, which outlined her face in a striking, otherworldly beauty, and a smile so gracious, with a sparkle in those dark eyes. "Hello, stranger, my name is Veda." "Hello," said the stranger. "I'm a messenger of the Most High." The Most High asked, "Veda?" "Yes, the Most High. The Most High has heard you, and asked me to come and tell you of a future event. He who has no name will gift you with the child that you ask for." "A child? I am well beyond childbearing years. How is that possible?" The figure said, "With the Most High, there is no such thing as impossible. All things are possible, but all things should not be done." "If all things should not be done," asked Veda, "then why this, and why at this time?" "Because, my dear," said the figure, "now is the time. You will be gifted a baby girl, and you should call her Lacremela." "But Lacremela means the girl that cries," said Veda. "Is this the curse that goes along with the blessing?" "You will understand in due time," said the figure. Then she reached into her pocket and handed Veda a fruit that she had never seen before. "What is this?" asked Veda. "It is a pomegranate," said the figure. "Oh," said Veda, "I read about these in Greek mythology." "Yes," said the figure, "eat the seeds, not the flesh. I must go now." "I have so many questions," said Veda. "In good time," said the figure. "Goodbye, my dear." "Goodbye," said Veda. "What is your name?" "Oh, I never thought of that," said the figure. "Where I come from, we don't use names. We recognize each other by our souls. Goodbye." The figure waved and walked away to a sled parked in the road. The two zebras whinnied as she pulled the reins, and tromp, 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 neigh, 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 away with a faint jingle of bells disappearing around the curve in the road. No sooner than the mysterious figure disappeared, all the villagers came running from the houses, bundled up in wool hats, bonnets, and heavy cloaks and boots. They gathered in Jan and Veda's front yard, overlapping into the gate and spilling out into the street. One young man, Philip, reached to the door. Knock, knock, knock. Veda tightened her braid, took a look in the mirror, looked out the window, and was surprised by the cacophony taking place at her front door. She opened it as soon as a gust of very cold wind rushed in and blew the tablecloth and dried herbs hanging from the baskets. "Hello, everyone," she said, as she pulled the door back behind her and stood on the little front porch. Philip, shivering, quickly spoke, with steam pouring from his mouth with every utterance. Who was the mysterious woman?" he asked. Then every man, woman, and child asked the same thing in one loud voice. "Was she a princess?" asked a little girl named Violetta. "We have never seen anyone like her here before." Then everyone else shouted random questions, emphasizing the same ideas and the sensationalism of the event. One boy, Remus, shouted, "Her sleigh was amazing, white with silver and gold paint and rails of blue iron. It was amazing. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And the seats were blue like the sky, the handles and lamps gold. Who was she? Where was she from?" he excitedly chattered. And this time, Jan came from the barn in the back of the property, and because he was astounded by the sound of the mob, he adjusted his little wool hat and leaned his wooden pitchfork against the wall. "What is all this commotion about?" he asked. Everyone, including Veda, started recounting their version of the story. Now, said Jan, "let's let Veda tell the story first." So Veda pulled her jacket tighter and her scarf tighter and swallowed the lump in her throat because she had never spoken to a crowd this big in all her life. And she breathed in the very cold and dry air that hurt her lungs and breathed out a sigh in the steam and began her story.